My hands are shaking as I tell you this story. Even now, 6 months later, I can barely believe my own son could do what he did to me. I'm Dorothy, 81 years old. And I've lived through the Great Depression, raised 4 children, and buried the love of my life. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for the morning. I looked out my kitchen window and saw my heart being torn apart by bulldozers. You see, it wasn't just a garden they destroyed that October morning in Salem, Oregon. It was 53 years of marriage. It was the place where I whispered goodnight to my husband Robert every evening for 5 years after cancer took him from me. It was where I planted a rose for each of my children when they were born, where I taught my grandchildren to pull weeds and water seeds, and my son Marcus, my middle boy. The one I trusted most, sold it behind my back for 30 pieces of silver. Well, actually it was $47,000, but the betrayal cuts just as deep. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to know that this story gets more heartbreaking with every twist, but I promise you, it ends with hope. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you loved with all your heart, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Your support means everything to an old woman like me trying to find her voice again. And if you have your own story about family betrayal, share it in the comments below. We're all in this together. Now, let me take you back to that terrible morning when my world fell apart. I've always been an early riser. Robert used to tease me that I'd wake up before the roosters if we lived on a farm. That Tuesday morning was no different. I was up at 5:30, made my coffee the way Robert taught me 54 years ago, and shuffled to the back porch in my worn pink slippers to watch the sunrise over my garden. But instead of roses, I saw destruction. The coffee mug fell from my hands before my mind could even process what I was seeing. It shattered on the wooden deck, the deck Robert built with his own hands the summer before his diagnosis, and the sound mixed with this horrible wailing noise that I realized was coming from me. My David Austin roses were gone, the memorial rose I'd planted for my stillborn daughter, Emma, who would have been 55 this year, gone. The climbing rose that covered the arbor where Robert proposed on bended knee in 1968, worn out by its row, odds and thrown in a pile like garbage. But worst of all, the small section near the back fence where I'd scattered Robert's ashes according to his wishes, where I'd planted his favorite yellow roses and talked to him every morning for 5 years. That sacred ground was nothing but churned mud and tire tracks. A young man in coveralls was hammering stakes into what used to be my prized flower bed. I stumbled down the steps, my arthritis forgotten in my panic, still in my nightgown and robe. "Stop!" I screamed, grabbing his arm with strength I didn't know I still had. "Stop right now. This is my garden." He looked at me with the kind of pity you give to confused old people. And that look broke something inside me. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but we have work orders. Your son Marcus hired us yesterday. He said the family needed this area cleared for development." The word family hit me like a physical blow. Family. I am the family. This is my property. The young man's face softened, and I could see he was uncomfortable. "Ma'am, your son showed us all the paperwork. He said you'd been told. Maybe you should call him." I stood there in the ruins of everything I held dear, wearing my nightgown in front of strangers, and felt smaller than I had since I was a child. The workers were staring at me now, whispering to each other. I could almost hear their thoughts. "Poor old lady, doesn't remember what she agreed to." But I remembered everything. I remembered every rose I'd planted, every morning I'd spent in that garden talking to Robert's spirit, every penny I'd saved to make it beautiful, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that I had never, ever agreed to this. I called Marcus immediately, my fingers shaking so badly I had to redial twice. When he answered, his voice had that careful, patient tone he used when he thought I was being unreasonable. "Mom, good morning. You're up early." Marcus, there are bulldozers in my garden. My voice came out small and broken, and I hated how weak I sounded. A pause, then, Mom, we talked about this, remember? The developer made that incredible offer for the back section. You said it was too good to pass up. I said no such thing. The words exploded out of me. That's where your father is buried, Mom. Dad's not buried there, he was cremated, and you can't keep living in the past. This money will secure your future. That is his burial ground. I scattered his ashes there with my own hands. I was crying now, ugly sobs that made it hard to speak. Marcus's voice got quieter, more condescending. Mom, I think you're getting confused again. We've all been worried about your memory lately. Maybe it's time we talked about getting you some help. He hung up on me. My own son hung up on me while I was crying about my husband's desecrated grave. I sat on my kitchen floor in my nightgown, surrounded by broken coffee mug pieces, and cried. Harder than I had since Robert's funeral, not just for the garden, but for the son I thought I knew. The boy I'd rocked when he had nightmares. The teenager I'd stayed up with when his heart was broken, the man I'd trusted with my deepest fears about growing old alone. That's when I remembered the lockbox. I'd been saving it for when my children were mature enough to handle wealth responsibly. After Robert died, I'd quietly accumulated more money than any of them knew, not just from his life insurance, but from investments I'd made. Property I'd inherited from my mother, and a small business I'd sold 5 years ago. The trust fund was worth $23 million, carefully managed and completely legal. I'd been waiting for the right time to share this gift with my children. I'd imagined their joy, their relief, their gratitude for a mother who'd planned so carefully for their futures. But as I pulled out the trust documents with trembling hands, I found something that made my blood freeze. Mixed in with papers I remembered putting there was a power of attorney document, dated 2 weeks ago, with my signature giving Marcus complete control over my property and finances. I stared at that signature for 10 minutes. It looked exactly like my handwriting, but I had no memory of signing it, none, and I would remember signing away my independence. That's not something you forget, even at 81. Then I remembered. Marcus had been here that day, helping me organize my paperwork. He'd brought his friend Derek, who worked as a notary. They'd been so helpful, so kind. Derek had even complimented my apple pie while I was serving pie and feeling grateful for my thoughtful son. They were forging documents to steal my life from me. I couldn't stop shaking as I called my attorney, Jonna Morrison. She'd been Robert's friend first, then our lawyer for 20 years. When I tried to explain what was happening, my words came out in a jumbled rush between sobs. Dorothy, slow down. Take a deep breath. Tell me exactly what you found. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then Jonette's voice, colder than I'd ever heard it. Dorothy, what Marcus has done is called elder financial abuse. If he forged that power of attorney, it's a felony. But I need you to listen to me very carefully. We have to be smart about this. I want him arrested, I said, surprised by the venom in my own voice. I understand, but if we move too fast, he might try to take more from you or turn your other children against you. You said he's already suggesting you have memory problems. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about money. Marcus was systematically destroying my credibility, making everyone think I was a confused old woman who couldn't be trusted with her own life. If I accused him now, who would believe me? Over the concerned son who was just trying to help his declining mother. Jonna, what if no one believes me? Then we make sure they do, but first, you need somewhere safe to keep your important documents. Is there someone you trust completely? My daughter Sarah, my baby girl, now 55 and stronger than I ever was, the one who called me every Sunday without fail, who remembered the anniversary of Robert's death every year, who still asked for my advice even though she was more Successful than I'd ever dreamed of being. Sarah, I whispered. When Sarah arrived 3 hours later, I was still in my nightgown. She took one look at me and wrapped me in her arms like I was the child, and she was the mother. Mom, what happened? You sounded so scared on the phone. I showed her everything: the destroyed garden, the forged power of attorney, the trust documents Marcus had never seen, with each revelation. Sarah's face grew harder, more determined. She had Robert's steel spine and my stubborn heart. Mom, this is criminal. We're going to nail him to the wall. But as we sat there making plans, sharing outrage and tears, I realized something that scared me more than Marcus's betrayal. I realized how isolated I'd become since Robert died, how much I'd come to depend on my children's validation, how desperately I needed them to still see me as their strong, capable mother. Marcus hadn't just stolen my garden. He'd stolen my confidence in my own mind, my own memories, my own worth. And that, more than any amount of money, was unforgivable. The hardest part wasn't setting the trap, it was pretending to be the broken old woman Marcus wanted me to be for the next 2 weeks. I became an Oscar-worthy actress when he called. I let my voice tremble. When he visited, I repeated myself and seemed confused about dates. I let him help me organize bills I was perfectly capable of handling myself. It killed me to act helpless, but I needed him to reveal his true intentions. Jonna helped me create fake documents that appeared to leave Marcus as sole heir to an $800 zero offshore account, medical reports suggesting early dementia, bank statements showing assets he'd never seen. We scattered them around my house like a breadcrumb trail of vulnerability. The fake dementia diagnosis was the hardest part. As I typed the words mild cognitive impairment with potential for rapid progression, I thought about all the genuinely suffering people with this disease. And I felt sick using it as a prop. But Marcus needed to believe I was helpless for the trap to work. I left the fake will on my kitchen counter the next time he visited. I watched him accidentally see it while helping with my mail. Watched his eyes scan every line. Watched him carefully photograph it with his phone when he thought I wasn't looking. Mom, he said after pocketing his phone, have you shown this will to anyone else? Oh, Marcus, I can't remember. Everything is so confusing lately. Sarah keeps asking about finances, but I don't want to worry her with my problems. That was the moment I saw my real son disappear completely. The mask slipped just for a second, and I saw something cold and calculating look out through his eyes, something that had nothing to do with love or concern or family. Maybe I should handle all your financial paperwork from now on. He said softly, to protect you from making mistakes. Would that help Sarah and Tommy and David too? I asked, playing the worried mother. Of course, Mom, that's all I want, to protect our family's future. Over the next few days, Marcus became increasingly aggressive about gaining control. He brought me new documents to sign, arranged meetings with his financial advisor, suggested I sell the house and move into a nice facility where people could take care of me properly. Every conversation was recorded, every forged signature was photographed by Jeanette's investigator, every lie was documented with timestamps and witnesses. But the worst part was watching him look at me, this person he'd supposedly loved his whole life, and seeing only dollar signs. When he talked about my future, he wasn't seeing Dorothy, the woman who'd given him life. He was seeing assets to be managed, problems to be solved, obstacles to be removed. I began to understand that I'd lost my son long before I discovered his betrayal. The real Marcus had been gone for months, maybe years, replaced by this stranger who wore his face but had none of his heart. The phone call from Tommy broke what was left of my heart. My youngest, my baby boy, who was now 42 but still called me Mama when he was scared, was crying, Mama, I'm so scared for you. Marcus showed me your medical reports. He says you're getting really sick, that you might not remember us much longer. I closed my eyes and felt something die inside me. Tommy, honey, I'm okay, I promise. I'm okay, but Mama, you forgot my birthday last month, and when I called last week, you didn't remember that Jenny had surgery. His voice was breaking with every word. I had forgotten his birthday for the first time in 42 years, and I had forgotten about his wife's surgery because I'd been so consumed with documenting Marcus's abuse. The irony was devastating in trying to prove I wasn't losing my mind. I'd been neglecting the very relationships that proved I was still. Me, Tommy, I've been distracted, but I'm not sick. Your brother is lying to you. Mama, why would Marcus lie? He loves you. We all love you. Sarah thinks maybe you need more help too. Sarah said what? She called me yesterday. She's worried that you're getting paranoid, talking about conspiracies. Marcus is just trying to protect you. I hung up the phone and screamed. Actually screamed at the top of my lungs in my empty house until my throat was raw. Marcus hadn't just forged my signature, he'd turned my own children against each other, used their love for me as a weapon to isolate me. When I called Sarah to confront her, her confusion was genuine. Mom, I never called Tommy. But he called me asking if I thought you needed professional care. He said Marcus was concerned about your paranoia. We realized then that Marcus was playing us like chess pieces, feeding each of us different information, creating doubt and suspicion where there had been trust and love. Tommy and David weren't betraying me, they were being manipulated by a master manipulator who knew exactly which emotional buttons to push. But the damage was done. My family was fracturing along lines Marcus had carefully drawn. Even worse, I could see the doubt in Sarah's eyes now. She believed me. But part of her was wondering, what if Marcus was right? What if her mother really was losing her grip on reality? That night, I sat in Robert's chair and cried until I had no tears left. I wasn't just fighting for my money or my property anymore. I was fighting for my sanity, my credibility, my right to be believed. I was fighting to remain a person instead of becoming a problem to be managed. At 81 years old, I was fighting for the right to exist as myself. The family meeting was scheduled for a Monday morning at Jeanette's office. I chose my clothes carefully, my navy blue dress with the pearl necklace Robert gave me for our 40th anniversary. I wanted to look like the woman I'd always been, dignified, competent, loved. Marcus arrived carrying a briefcase and wearing his most sincere expression. Tommy came looking heartbroken and worried. David drove down from Seattle, clearly uncomfortable with the whole situation. Sarah sat beside me, her hand in mine, both of us trying to project strength we didn't entirely feel. Thank you all for coming, Jeanne began. Your mother has asked me to review her situation and address some concerns about her care and finances. Marcus immediately took control, spreading his prepared documents across the table. I've created a comprehensive care plan for Mom, given her declining mental state. We need to act quickly to protect her assets and ensure she gets proper medical attention. He was so smooth, so confident, so convincing. I watched Tommy nodding along, saw David's relieved expression at having someone else handle this difficult situation. For a moment, I almost believed Marcus myself. Then Jeanne placed the first piece of evidence on the table. That's interesting, Marcus, because I've been reviewing some documents too. Let's start with this power of attorney you've been using to make decisions for your mother. Marcus didn't even flinch. Yes, Mom signed that 2 weeks ago. She was having a good day, very clear about wanting my help. The problem, Jeanne continued, her voice steady and professional, is that the notary who allegedly witnessed this signing, Derek Hendricks, was in Hawaii that entire week. I have his flight receipts and hotel confirmations. The silence in that room was deafening. I watched Marcus's face cycle through surprise, calculation, And finally, cold anger. There must be some mistake, he started. There's no mistake. Jeanne placed another document on the table. This is a report from a handwriting expert. The signature is forged, Marcus, expertly done. But forged nonetheless. Tommy gasped and looked at me with horror. David leaned forward, his face pale. Sarah squeezed my hand so tight it hurt. But Jeanne wasn't finished. We also have security footage from a neighbor's camera showing you meeting with the construction crew 3 days before you claim you discussed the garden sale with your mother. You're twisting everything, Marcus said, but his voice was different now, sharper. And finally, Jeanne said, placing a recording device on the table, we have this conversation from last Tuesday. She pressed play, and we heard Marcus's voice. Clear as day, Mom can't remember things clearly anymore. This money will be wasted on her. She needs to be in a facility where professionals can handle her. The conversation had been recorded during one of his visits when he thought I was napping. In it, he discussed my declining value as an investment with someone on the phone, probably his financial advisor. The room erupted. Tommy started crying deep, awful sobs that shook his whole body. David was demanding to know how long this had been going on. Sarah was on her feet, pointing at Marcus and shouting about betrayal and criminal behavior. But I just stared at my middle son, this stranger wearing my child's face, and felt something close to grief, not for the money, not even for the garden, but for the boy I'd lost somewhere along the way. Marcus's response told me everything I needed to know about who he'd become. Instead of remorse, instead of shame or apology, he looked at me with pure rage. You stupid old bitch, he snarled. And the words hit me like physical blows. You can't lie forever. You're useless now, just a burden waiting to die. All that money sitting there while you water plants and talk to ghosts, it's wasted on you. The silence that followed was absolute. Even Marcus seemed shocked by what had come out of his mouth. Tommy's crying stopped. David's face went white. Sarah looked like she'd been slapped. And I felt something break inside me that would never heal, not just my heart, but my understanding of what my own child was capable of. Get out, I whispered, then louder. Get out of my sight. Marcus was arrested the next day. The charges were elder financial abuse, forgery, and fraud. He pleaded guilty 6 months later and was sentenced to 18 months in prison plus full restitution. But the legal victory felt hollow compared to the family healing that had to happen. Tommy was the first to come to me 3 days after the confrontation. He arrived at my door with red eyes and flowers from his garden roses, because he remembered they were my favorite. Mama, he said, and his voice was 5 years old again. I'm so sorry. I should have believed you. I should have protected you. We held each other on my front porch and cried together for the brother he'd lost, for the trust that had been shattered, for the innocence we could never get back. You were trying to take care of me, I told him. That's what good sons do. Marcus twisted your love and used it as a weapon, but that doesn't make the love any less real. David's healing was quieter, but just as deep. He spent a weekend helping me restore the garden, working in silence beside me as we replanted the memorial roses on Sunday afternoon. As we sat in the dirt with our hands covered in soil, he finally spoke. I keep thinking about all the times he talked about your declining mental state, he said. He was so convincing, so concerned. How did I not see it? Because you loved me, I said simply. He used that love against all of us. Sarah, my fierce protector, threw herself into helping me heal practically and emotionally. She found contractors to repair the garden damage, researched the best rose varieties to replace what had been destroyed, and even commissioned a small memorial stone for the spot where Robert's ashes were scattered. But more than that, she helped me reclaim my voice. When I started doubting myself, wondering if maybe I really was getting confused. She reminded me, Mom, you caught a criminal who had everyone else fooled. That's not the mind of someone who's losing it, that's the mind of someone who's still fighting. The garden restoration took months. Some of the original rose varieties were impossible to replace. And I had to accept that this new garden would be different from the one Marcus destroyed. But different didn't mean less beautiful. On a warm May morning, exactly 8 months after that horrible October day, I stood in my restored garden with all 3 of my remaining children and their families. Tommy's kids helped me plant the last memorial rose, a deep red variety called Mr. Lincoln that would bloom every year in Robert's honor. As I knelt in the soil, my arthritic hands steady and sure despite my 81 years, I realized something profound. Marcus had tried to take my garden, my money, my independence, my credibility, but he couldn't take who I was. He couldn't steal the love of my other children, the strength I'd built over 8 decades, or the wisdom I'd earned through surviving everything life threw at me. I was still Dorothy, still Robert's wife, still mother to 4 children even if one of them had lost his way, still the woman who'd raised a family and built a life and learned that love is complicated but worth fighting for. Marcus writes to me sometimes from prison. His letters are full of apologies and explanations, promises to make amends and be the son he used to be. I read every one, but I don't respond. Some wounds cut too deep for simple forgiveness. Some trust, once broken, can't be rebuilt with words. But I don't hate him, I mourn him, the way you mourn someone who's died, because the son I raised is gone. In his place is someone I don't recognize, someone who saw his mother's love as weakness, to be exploited rather than a gift to be treasured. People ask me if I regret having him prosecuted, if I wish I'd handled it within the family. But there was no family left to handle it within. Marcus had made sure of that, and other elderly people are safer, because he's being held accountable for what he did at 81. I've learned that being vulnerable doesn't mean being weak. Needing help doesn't mean giving up control, and loving someone doesn't mean accepting their abuse. I've learned that your children can break your heart in ways you never imagined, but they can also heal it in ways that surprise you. Most importantly, I've learned that I'm not done yet. Not done living, not done growing, not done protecting the people I love, including myself. My garden blooms again, my family is healing, and I'm still here, still Dorothy, still standing. If you've faced something similar, if someone you loved and trusted has betrayed you, or if you've watched a family member struggle with elder abuse, please share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to find their own strength. Remember, you're never too old to fight back, and you're never alone. We will share your stories and support each other through these painful experiences. You matter, your voice matters, and your story matters.